In late December 1980, something happened in a quiet forest in eastern England that would become one of the most debated UAP cases in British history. It did not happen in a remote wilderness. It happened near two military bases, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. At the time, these bases were used by U.S. Air Force personnel. They were part of a Cold War landscape of security, patrols, and constant readiness. That context matters, because when unusual lights appear near a military installation, they are not just strange. They're a potential threat. The case is often called Britain's Roswell, but that label can mislead. This story is not built around one dramatic crash. It is built around a sequence of nights, multiple witnesses, and a set of reports that never fully align into one clean explanation. It begins on the night of December 26, 1980. Security personnel reported unusual lights in Rendlesham Forest, a wooded area near the base. Some accounts describe a bright light descending, as if something was coming down into the trees. A security team was sent to investigate. They entered the forest expecting to find a downed aircraft, or perhaps a crashed civilian plane. What they found, according to later testimony, did not fit either. The accounts vary in detail, but the core story is consistent. The team moved through the trees and saw lights ahead. At times, the lights appeared to move. At times, they appeared to hover. Witnesses later described a glowing object between the trees. Some described it as metallic. Some said it had a smooth surface. Some said it was triangular. Others described it more cautiously, as a bright source of light that was difficult to judge in the dark. There are also claims about physical traces, impressions in the ground, broken branches, unusual marks, and there are claims about radiation readings taken later. These details are often cited as evidence that something physical occurred. But they're also the most disputed parts of the case, because the public does not have a single complete set of measurements that closes the debate. After the initial encounter, the situation did not end with a simple report. It continued. Over the next nights, more personnel reported lights in the area. Some described lights moving through the forest. Others described lights in the sky above the trees. And with each new account, the case grew. Not in clarity, in complexity. The most famous moment in the Rendlesham story came a few nights later. On December 28th, a group of personnel returned to the forest to investigate again. This time, the group included a senior officer, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. Halt's involvement is one reason the case gained credibility. A senior officer documenting an incident is not the same as rumors spreading through a barracks. During that night's investigation, Halt recorded audio as events unfolded. The recording captures confusion, observation, and attempts to describe what they were seeing. It does not sound like a polished story. It sounds like real people trying to understand something in real time. Accounts describe lights in the forest and lights in the sky. At some point, the group observed a bright light that appeared to move and change position. There are descriptions of a beam-like light or a concentrated source that seemed to send light downward. Again, the interpretation varies. Some say it was a directed beam. Others say it was a lighthouse effect or a misread source of light at distance. This is where the Rendlesham case becomes a battlefield of explanations. Because the forest environment is perfect for confusion. Trees block reference points. Distance is hard to judge. Lights can reflect off mist and moisture. And a bright light seen through branches can appear to move when the observer moves. So skeptics have offered potential explanations. One of the most common is a nearby lighthouse. From certain angles, a rotating lighthouse beam can appear as a bright, flashing light through trees. If you're unfamiliar with the area, it could be misinterpreted as something moving. Skeptics also point to stars and planets. bright celestial objects can appear unnaturally steady. And when seen through broken cloud, they can appear to blink. Then there are military flares. Flares can create dramatic lights in the sky. They can hover and descend slowly. From a distance, they can look like something extraordinary. These explanations are plausible, and in many cases, they may account for parts of what witnesses saw. But the Rendlesham case persists because it is not just one light in the sky. It is multiple nights, multiple witnesses, and claims of ground traces and close-range observation. So the real question becomes, how much of this case can be explained by ordinary sources and how much cannot? A disciplined approach does not pick one extreme. It separates the case into layers. Layer 1. Lights seen at a distance. This layer is vulnerable to misinterpretation. Lighthouses, stars, and flares can all create convincing illusions under the right conditions. Layer 2. Close-range observation in the forest. This layer is harder because it depends on distance. If a witness truly saw something close, the lighthouse explanation becomes weaker. But if the close object was a bright light seen through trees, the lighthouse explanation becomes stronger. Layer 3. Physical traces. This layer is the most contested because without full documentation, traces can be interpreted in many ways. Marks in soil could have ordinary causes. Radiation readings can be influenced by many sources, including measurement error, background variation, or local materials. Still, the presence of claimed traces adds weight in the minds of believers. Now, the most important reason Rendlesham remains famous is that the case generated official paperwork. A memo written afterward became part of the public discussion. It described unusual lights and an investigation. It did not provide a definitive explanation. It did not declare extraterrestrials. It simply documented something that was treated as unusual. That kind of documentation is rare, and rare things attract attention. But documentation alone is not proof of a particular answer. It is proof that the incident was noticed and recorded. So what is the most reasonable conclusion? That depends on how you weigh the layers. If you focus on lights in the sky, the case can feel explainable. A lighthouse, flares, stars. If you focus on the claims of close-range contact, the case becomes more difficult. If those claims are accurate, then something unusual occurred near a sensitive military area over multiple nights. And if those claims are exaggerated or misinterpreted, then the case becomes an example of how confusion can become legend. The Rendlesham case may be famous because it sits perfectly on that boundary. It has enough official involvement to feel serious. It has enough ambiguity to resist closure. And it has enough atmosphere to become a lasting story. A dark forest, Cold War bases, security patrols. It feels cinematic, but the real mystery is not in the atmosphere. It is in the inconsistency. Different witnesses remember different shapes. Different accounts emphasize different details. One person sees a solid object. Another sees lights through trees. One person reports ground marks. Another dismisses them. And when a case produces that kind of variation, it becomes hard to close. Because closing a case requires one thing above all: a clean timeline with clean data. And Rendlesham does not offer that. It offers fragments. Audio, memo, testimony, and fragments can support multiple narratives. Now, if you want to treat this as a serious modern UAP case, here is the best way to hold it. Something unusual was seen near the bases. Personnel investigated. Multiple reports were made. A senior officer recorded audio and later documented the event in writing. The incident was significant enough to be remembered and debated for decades. But the available public information does not allow a definitive conclusion. Some elements align with mundane explanations like a lighthouse and flares. Other elements, especially the claims of close encounter and physical traces, remain disputed and difficult to verify fully. So the Rendlesham Forest incident remains what many UAP cases ultimately become: a file with evidence, a file with contradictions, and a file that depends on how you interpret incomplete data. And that is why it matters. Not because it proves an extraordinary answer, but because it demonstrates how quickly uncertainty grows when an event happens in the dark, near a military base, and leaves behind only partial records. The forest kept its secret. The bases returned to routine. But the story stayed, and the question stayed with it. What did the security teams actually encounter among those trees in December of 1980? A lighthouse beam and mistaken distance? A military exercise misread in the dark? Or something else that never fit into the normal categories? In the end, Rendlesham doesn't give us a final answer. It gives us a lesson. When the environment is confusing and the data is incomplete, even trained observers can disagree. And when they disagree, the mystery becomes permanent.